Hey guys, it's Nicole here from Toujours. Today we are going to be going over how to make an extra large macaron sandwich. So instead of piping our macaron shells with about 2-inch, we're going to be doing 4-inch macaron shells, and we're going to pair it together, sort of a play on what I've previously posted for a macaron cake. If you've seen my video for the heart macaron cake, instead of the cake where I layer the shells both facing down, we're gonna pair up our macaron shells just like normal, and we're gonna add some cake in the center and some pistachio buttercream just to make it this big fat ice cream sandwich, kind of like macaron, but with cake. In order to start our macaron sandwich, we're gonna need to make sure our shell size is gonna be the same as our cake size. So here I have a 4-inch ring, and I'm going to just trace this 4-inch ring on some parchment and place that under my silicone mat so I can pipe the right sized macaron shell. Later, I'll also use this same ring to cut out my circular cake discs that I can place inside my macaron. Once we have that template made, make your macaron batter. I just posted a video on how to make chocolate Italian method macarons. If you have any questions on how to make the batter for our macarons, you can refer back to that. Or if you prefer the French method, you can go back to my Macaron 101 video to check out how to make that. You can use either Italian method, French method, you could use Swiss method. You just want your batter at the flowy consistency and ready to pipe. When I'm doing a large circular macaron, I prefer just to pipe like I am doing my smaller macaron shells, but larger, right? So I'm staying in the center and putting pressure out till it reaches about a 1/2 inch to my template line. Once it's a 1/2 inch away from my template line, I stop and I move on. Once we are done piping all our shells, tap out your tray and your batter will spread out to the end of your template line. When you pipe this large of a macaron shell, it tends to mound up on itself. So you definitely are going to need to spread it out with tapping vigorously. There's also a second way that you could pipe these if you would prefer, which is a very traditional way of piping larger macaron shells. You're going to hold your piping tip right in the center of your template and then circle around it and continuously go around and around until you've reached almost to the edge of your template, and then tap out your tray and use a scribe just to get rid of some of those circular piping lines. Once you have your macaron shells piped, you're either gonna let these rest till they have a skin, or if you're using an airbag tray like I am, we can pop these right in to our oven and bake them off. I bake these at the same temperature as my smaller macarons. I preheated at 300 Fahrenheit, and then once my tray goes in, I drop down to 280 just to keep that internal oven temperature around 300 Fahrenheit. When baking these larger macarons, depending on how thick and how big your macarons are, I usually bake about 3 extra minutes. For small shells in my bigger oven, I'm baking usually around 18 minutes. For these, I baked about 21 minutes. A good way to tell if those large macaron shells are baked through is to do like you do with your little ones. Press on the sides, make sure the feet are firm. And another thing you can do is sort of press down and feel the top middle of your big shell and make sure it's not super soft. If it's fairly hard and you know it's gonna harden more as you get it out of the oven, then you're good to go. If it's soft, make sure you bake longer. Once these macaron shells were done baking, I took them out of the oven and let them cool completely. Do not try to take these off of your mat before they are completely cooled. They take longer to cool than your smaller macaron shells, so give them at least 15 minutes. While these are cooling, I chose to make my cake that I'm going to fill my big macaron sandwich with. For this macaron sandwich, I made my devil's food cake. I have previously posted the complete recipe on my heart macaron cake from a few years back. You can go check that out if you're interested. You could fill with whatever cake you'd like. A box cake will work just fine as well. But I love this cake because it is super fast. I always have all the ingredients on hand and it's inexpensive to make. So while my macaron shells were cooling, I whipped that cake together, and then I'm gonna store my cake and my macaron shells overnight. My cake goes in the fridge. My macaron shells I usually put in my freezer just for one night. Whenever you're ready to assemble, get everything out. Let your macarons come back to room temperature if you chose to freeze them overnight. And let's make our chocolate glaze. This is what I use to cover my eclairs with. It sets really nicely because it has gelatin in it. You could choose to just dip your macaron sandwiches into a chocolate ganache or melted chocolate. You choose what you want to do, but this glaze is very nice for coating. For this recipe, we're going to bloom a teaspoon of powdered gelatin in 2 tablespoons of cold water. Just sprinkle the gelatin over the cold water and set it aside and let it bloom or soak up that water for about 3 to 5 minutes. While that is blooming, we're gonna heat up 64 grams of half and half on the stovetop with 20 grams of corn syrup. Bring that to a boil, take it off your heat, add in your bloomed gelatin, stir it a little bit to melt it in, and then add in 140 grams of semi-sweet chocolate. Stir that to combine just like you're emulsifying a ganache from the center and out, or you could use an immersion blender to blend it up and emulsify it. Once it's nice, beautiful, and shiny, let's set it aside and gather everything needed for assembling our macaron sandwiches. Here I've got my shells, my cake, and some pistachio buttercream. This pistachio marshmallow buttercream is talked about in my last video for chocolate Italian method macarons, and you can look back to that if you're wanting that recipe. And then I also have some ground up pistachios that I toasted before this and ground up in a food processor. Just lay out your whole assembly line and let's get started on making these macarons. I'm using that 4-inch ring as a cookie cutter here to cut my circular discs for the inserts for these macaron sandwiches. Place those to the side, have those ready. And then I have my macaron shell and I'm piping pistachio buttercream on the base. I add the cake layer, more pistachio buttercream, and then I'm sprinkling on some ground pistachios, and then top it with your second macaron shell. I know these are huge, but they are so fun. Once you have your macaron shells assembled, then we're gonna dip it into our glaze. So our glaze here is not completely cooled. You want it fairly warm so it will drip off a little bit and you won't coat it too thick. So here I'm dipping in that macaron sandwich just to get a nice little coat on it. Once you have your glaze dripped off, shake your macaron sandwich a little bit and get it to drip off the excess, and sprinkle on, if you want some more pistachios or whatever flavors you are doing. You could sprinkle with cocoa nibs or sprinkles or graham cracker crumbs. You know, the possibilities are endless with what flavors you choose for your macaron sandwiches. But here I use those ground pistachios. And your final result is just this really elegant macaron sandwich. These would look gorgeous on any dessert table. These could be an individual serving, or you could definitely cut them up with a knife and enjoy as you would a cake. The flavors were so delicious, and there's so many possibilities for your own flavor combinations for these cakes, and they'll add some pizzazz to any dessert table. So I hope you guys enjoy. I can't wait to see different flavor combinations from you guys. Let me know in the comments below if you have any questions I didn't cover in the video. Happy macaron sandwich making.